Welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be tackling a pretty complex topic, part 4 of Baruch Spinoza's Ethics.
Ooh, exciting.
Yeah, it's we're going to be exploring some really radical ideas about human emotions, good and evil, and like what it even means to be free. So, strap yourselves in.
Yeah. This is heady stuff.
It is. It is. Now, Spinoza wasn't really known for being a like feel-good philosopher.
Right.
He lived way back in the 1600s and was considered like pretty dangerous for his time.
Yeah.
But in Ethics, he lays out this really fascinating framework for understanding like the human condition and specifically how our emotions can either like trap us or actually set us free.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's really relevant, I think, for people today,
I think so too.
even though it's from the 1600s.
Totally, totally. And I've got you here, an expert, to help us unpack all this.
Glad to be here.
Spinoza can be pretty dense.
Oh, yeah,
But trust me, there are some serious aha moments in here.
for sure.
Have you ever wondered, like, if it's even possible to truly control your emotions?
That's a good question.
Or, like, what would it even mean to live a life that's guided entirely by reason? Well, Spinoza's got some answers, and they might just, like, challenge everything you thought you knew.
Yeah. He really flips the script in a lot of ways.
He does, he does. Right off the bat, he throws us a curveball right from the beginning with how he even defines good and evil.
Uh-huh.
And it's not about like some universal moral code
Right.
or like a list of commandments or anything. He says that good is whatever helps us understand,
Okay.
and evil is whatever hinders that understanding. So it's all about increasing our power to like act in alignment with our own nature, not like some external rules.
Yeah. I mean, this is where he really, breaks from traditional ethics,
Yeah.
He's not interested in, judging actions as, inherently right or wrong.
Right, right.
It's more about, does this action help me to, grasp the world more clearly, or does it cloud my judgment?
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
So it's not even about being a good person in the conventional sense.
Right.
It's about understanding what truly serves our own growth and power.
Mm.
So think about how that might change your perspective on everyday choices.
Yeah.
Literally what you eat,
Yeah.
how you react to stress, even who you choose to spend time with,
Yeah.
Now, this is where Spinoza's ideas start to get really challenging. And, I mean, let's be honest, kind of unsettling. He argues that most of us are actually living in a state of what he calls bondage.
Oh.
Yeah. Essentially, we're slaves to our passions.
Okay.
So, think about it. How many times have you, known the quote-unquote right thing to do? Maybe eating healthy, going to bed early, but then you end up giving into that, craving for junk food or staying up late, scrolling through social media. That's Spinoza's bondage in action.
I mean, we've all been there.
Right. We've all been there.
Yeah. So Spinoza's saying that these passions arise from things outside of ourselves, things
Yeah.
that we react to without even realizing it. And here's the kicker. He doesn't see us as being separate from nature. He sees us as part of nature. So just like a plant responding to sunlight, we're subject to those laws of nature,
Right.
including the power of those external things over us.
Makes sense.
Okay, so I don't know about you, but I'm starting to feel a little trapped here.
Yeah.
If we're all just puppets of our passions and these external forces, is there any hope for us to actually make free choices?
Good question. Yeah.
So this is where Spinoza introduces this concept of the free man.
Mhm.
And this isn't like some superhero or anything.
Right.
It's someone who lives according to reason. They're not driven by those fleeting emotions.
They've mastered their domain.
Right, right. But how do we even begin to break free from this bondage? I mean, where do we even start?
Yeah. Well, for Spinoza, the key to freedom lies in understanding. So the more we understand ourselves and the world around us, the less we're swayed by those external forces, right? It's kind of like seeing the strings on the puppet and realizing, oh, I can cut these.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, that's a good way to put it. I
Yeah.
like that. So it's a journey.
It's
Definitely a process, right?
Uh-huh.
We start by recognizing those moments where our passions are calling the shots.
Yeah.
Maybe it's that urge to argue with someone online or that craving for a sugary treat.
Yeah.
And then we can start asking ourselves, what's really driving this? Is
Right.
this truly serving me? Or am I just reacting to something outside of myself?
Totally.
So, all of this might sound a bit abstract. So let's get into some specifics. Spinoza had some seriously thought-provoking things to say about like individual emotions, and I'm not gonna lie, some of them might make you raise an eyebrow.
Right.
For example, let's talk about pity.
Okay.
We often view pity as like a good thing, a sign of empathy. But Spinoza just throws down the gauntlet
Oh, boy.
and says pity is useless.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Hot take.
It's a hot take.
Yeah.
Right. So what's going on here?
Yeah, so what's fascinating here is that he's not saying we shouldn't help those in need,
Oh,
but he believes that true compassion comes from a place of understanding, not just being swayed by emotions. So if our actions are motivated by pity, we're essentially like letting someone else's emotions control us rather than acting from our own like reasoned judgment.
that's interesting. So imagine this. You see someone who's struggling, and instead of getting swept up in that feeling of pity, you take a step back. You say, okay, what's the most effective way to help this person? What resources are available? What actions will actually empower them rather than just making me feel good about myself? So, that's not to say that our emotions are irrelevant, but Spinoza wants us to like examine them critically, to understand their root causes and to see how they might be like clouding our judgment. And this leads us to another emotion that Spinoza had some strong opinions about hatred. And he saw hatred as always bad, no exceptions. Not exactly a warm and fuzzy philosophy, right?
No, not really. It's a tough one.
Mm.
I mean, this might seem extreme, but it ties back to his core idea that everything strives to like persevere in its being.
Yeah.
So hatred, by its very nature, aims to destroy. So it goes against that fundamental drive for self-preservation, both in ourselves and in others.
So even if we feel justified in our hatred, Spinoza would argue that it's ultimately self-defeating. It
Right.
keeps us trapped in that cycle of negativity, and it prevents us from seeing clearly. It's like that saying, drinking poison and hoping the other person dies.
Exactly. Yeah.
Are you ready for another controversial one?
Hit me.
Let's talk about humility and repentance.
Ooh.
Usually seen as virtues, right?
Traditionally, yeah.
Well, Spinoza throws another wrench in the works and calls these passions not virtues. He saw them as stemming from weakness, a lack of self-understanding, rather than like a reasoned perspective.
Right. And remember, he's all about power and understanding.
Yeah.
True virtue, for him, comes from like a clear-eyed view of ourselves and our place in the world.
Right.
And so humility and repentance, he argues, are based on like a negative self-image,
Uh-huh.
which ultimately hinders our ability to like act effectively.
So instead of beating ourselves up for past mistakes, Spinoza would say, let's understand why we made those mistakes. Let's use that knowledge to grow and make better choices in the future. So it's about learning from our experiences, not like wallowing in guilt and self-recrimination. Okay, and then there's pride. Spinoza takes a nuanced approach here, arguing that pride can come from both overestimating ourselves and underestimating ourselves.
Interesting. Yeah, and what's interesting is that he recognizes that pride can manifest as false modesty, so like downplaying our abilities or achievements.
Oh, wow.
Right. But in both cases, we're not seeing ourselves clearly. We're letting our emotions distort that self-image.
So whether we're puffing ourselves up or putting ourselves down, we're ultimately letting our emotions kind of cloud our judgment.
Right.
The key, according to Spinoza, is to develop a clear and accurate understanding of ourselves,
Uh-huh.
our strengths, our weaknesses, and our place in this grand scheme of things.
The big picture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Big picture thinking.
Big picture.
So we've been going pretty deep into Spinoza's ideas about individual emotions.
Yeah, it's pretty intense stuff.
It is. But here's where things get really interesting. He doesn't just like stop there.
Right.
He actually goes on to paint this like grand vision of what it means to live a truly fulfilling life.
Okay.
And it's not about what you might expect.
Interesting. So what does he say?
Well, one of the most profound takeaways from part 4 of Ethics is his emphasis on understanding
Okay.
as like the ultimate good.
Okay.
It's not about wealth.
Right.
It's not about fame.
Uh-huh.
It's not even about pleasure.
Okay.
Those are all fleeting
Yeah.
external things.
Right.
True fulfillment for Spinoza lies in expanding our knowledge of ourselves, the world, and ultimately what he calls God.
Oh, okay. So this is where it gets a little tricky.
It does. Now, I know the word God can be kind of loaded,
For sure.
so let's unpack that a little bit.
Okay.
Spinoza wasn't talking about like some bearded figure in the clouds.
Right.
For him, God represents the infinite, all-encompassing substance of reality. So, like, think of it like the unified fabric of existence.
Okay, so it's more like a pantheistic view.
Exactly.
Like
Yeah.
God is everything.
God is everything, right?
Yeah.
And for Spinoza, knowing God equates to grasping the fundamental nature of reality,
Mm.
seeing how everything is interconnected and understanding like the underlying order of things. And he believed that this pursuit of knowledge is what truly elevates us as human beings.
I mean, it's a pretty lofty goal.
It is. It is. But, it's like those moments when you suddenly see the connections between things.
Yep.
You're like, oh, I get it. Like the puzzle pieces click into place and you get this sense of like awe and clarity. And Spinoza seems to be saying that those moments aren't just like fleeting glimpses of insight.
Right.
They're actually pointing us towards a more profound way of being.
Oh, interesting.
Now, here's what really blows my mind. Spinoza doesn't see this pursuit of understanding as like some solitary endeavor.
Okay.
He argues that it actually has profound social implications.
Wow. So, how so?
Well, he believed that as individuals cultivate like greater understanding, they become more useful to one another.
Uh-huh.
And this leads to a more harmonious and just society.
So it's like this ripple effect.
It is, yeah, like a virtuous cycle, If we're each striving to understand ourselves and the world more deeply, we're less likely to be ruled by like those petty ego-driven passions.
Right.
And we're more likely to see the bigger picture, to cooperate,
Yeah.
and to act in ways that benefit like the collective good.
I could see that.
Okay, I'm on board with this idea, but I have to admit it all sounds a bit lofty.
Yeah.
Like, how do we actually put this into practice?
Right.
Does this mean like I need to spend all my time like meditating and pondering the mysteries of the universe?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, Spinoza recognized that we're all like embodied beings
Yeah.
living in a complex world. So it's not about becoming like some detached sage on a mountaintop.
Right.
It's more about bringing that understanding into our everyday choices and actions.
So it's like that age-old wisdom. It's not about what happens to you. It's about how you respond to it.
Exactly.
We can't always control the external forces that come our way, but we can cultivate the clarity and the wisdom to choose our responses.
I like that.
Right.
Yeah.
And this reminds me of something you said earlier. Spinoza wasn't interested in judging actions as inherently like good or bad.
Right.
He was more concerned with their consequences, their impact on our understanding, and their contribution to the well-being of ourselves and others.
Uh-huh.
So maybe it's less about like following a set of rules
Oh.
and more about developing a kind of ethical compass
Yeah.
that guides us towards those choices that promote understanding, connection, and a deeper sense of purpose.
I like that. It's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Makes me think about the current state of the world.
Yeah.
We seem to be living in a time of increasing division and polarization.
Yeah, it's a good point. And it actually highlights, I think, the relevance of Spinoza's philosophy today.
Right.
In a world that often feels like chaotic and fragmented, his ideas offer a really powerful antidote. This vision of a society that's grounded in reason, empathy, and a shared pursuit of understanding.
It's a nice vision.
It is. It is. So what do you think a Spinozan society would actually look like?
That's a good question.
I'm picturing like a world where people engage in respectful dialogue even when they disagree.
Yeah.
They value critical thinking. They seek out diverse perspectives.
Mhm.
They prioritize cooperation over competition.
Yeah.
And they recognize that our individual well-being is like inextricably linked to the well-being of the collective.
I mean, it sounds utopian, but
It does, but I think Spinoza genuinely believed that this kind of transformation was possible.
oh,
He saw reason not as some like abstract ideal,
yeah.
but as a powerful force
Uh-huh.
that could guide us towards a more just and harmonious future.
I mean, that's a pretty powerful idea. And that makes me think about one of his most famous quotes and maybe his most provocative. Man is a god to man.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. That phrase is often misunderstood.
Yeah, for sure.
Spinoza wasn't advocating for some kind of human worship.
Right.
He was actually highlighting the incredible potential of human beings to support and uplift one another, to act as agents of understanding and compassion in the world.
So it's more about our capacity for like goodness and helping each other.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like that feeling you get when you're working on a team
Mm-hmm.
and everyone is firing on all cylinders,
Yeah.
bringing their unique talents and perspectives to the table. And there's this sense of like collective power and purpose that emerges when people come together in a spirit of collaboration and mutual respect.
I can definitely see that.
And I think that's what Spinoza was getting at.
Yeah.
He believed that when we live in accordance with reason, when we cultivate understanding and empathy, we tap into a profound source of power and possibility, both individually and collectively.
It's a nice thought. But let's be real. We're all human.
Right.
We're not going to magically transform into perfectly rational beings overnight.
We're not.
I mean, there are going to be times when our passions get the better of us.
Totally.
When we make choices that we later regret.
For sure.
And Spinoza acknowledged that.
He did.
He wasn't advocating for some kind of emotional suppression. He recognized that emotions are an integral part of the human experience.
So it's not about becoming like some kind of Spock-like figure devoid of all feeling.
Right.
It's more about learning to understand and manage our emotions, to use our reason as a guide rather than letting our passions run the show.
Think of it like this. Our passions are like powerful currents.
Okay.
They can either sweep us away or they can propel us forward.
Uh-huh.
And it's up to us to learn how to navigate those currents, to harness their energy, and to steer ourselves toward our desired destination.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe it's less about eliminating our emotions and more about developing a kind of emotional intelligence.
Exactly.
So we can start by becoming more aware of our own, emotional patterns. What are our triggers? What tends to push our buttons? What situations bring out the best in us? Or the worst in us?
Yeah. Good questions.
And once we have a better understanding of our own emotional landscape, we can start to make more conscious choices about how we respond to the world around us.
I like that.
Right. So the next time you find yourself getting swept up in anger, frustration, anxiety, just try taking a pause. Ask yourself, what's really going on here? What am I reacting to? And is this reaction truly serving me?
Really good advice.
And you might be surprised at what you discover. Because often, beneath the surface of those really intense emotions, we find these deeper needs.
Yeah.
Needs for connection,
Right.
for understanding, for a sense of belonging. And by addressing those needs in a healthy and constructive way, we can start to create more fulfilling and meaningful experiences for ourselves and others. One of the things that really struck me about Spinoza's philosophy is his emphasis on the practical application of these ideas. He wasn't just interested in intellectual abstractions. He wanted to understand how these principles could be used to live a better life,
Right.
both individually and collectively.
Yeah, and this is where his concept of useful knowledge comes in.
Right.
Spinoza believed that knowledge is most valuable when it's applied, when it helps us to navigate the world more effectively and to create a more just and harmonious society.
So it's not about accumulating knowledge for knowledge's sake.
Right.
It's about using that knowledge to make better choices, to solve problems, and to create a more fulfilling and meaningful life for ourselves and others. It's like learning a new skill.
Yeah.
Like playing a musical instrument or speaking a foreign language. The real joy comes from using that skill, from expressing ourselves creatively, from connecting with others in new and meaningful ways. And I think that same principle applies to our understanding of Spinoza's philosophy.
Oh, interesting.
The real power of his ideas lies in their application and how they can help us to navigate the complexities of life, to make sense of our emotions, and to create a world that's more aligned with our deepest values and aspirations. And this brings us to another really fascinating aspect of Spinoza's thought, and that is his belief that true virtue is not about following a set of rigid rules, but about pursuing what is truly useful, and not in a selfish or ego-driven way.
Right. So what does he mean by useful?
Well, Spinoza argued that the more we understand, the more we realize that what is truly beneficial for us is also beneficial for others.
Okay, so it's like this enlightened self-interest.
It is, yeah. It's not about some kind of self-sacrificing altruism. It's about recognizing that our well-being is interconnected, that we thrive when others thrive. And it's about creating a world where everyone has the opportunity to flourish and to reach their full potential.
I mean, it might sound idealistic, but
It does, but I think it's a vision worth striving for. And Spinoza's philosophy offers a pretty compelling roadmap for how we might get there.
so how do we do that? Where do we start?
By cultivating understanding, by questioning our assumptions, and by choosing reason over reactivity, we can start to create a world that is more just, more compassionate, and more aligned with our deepest human values.
That's a really powerful message.
It is. It is. You know, as we've been talking about Spinoza, this whole idea of the free man keeps coming to mind. This
Hmm.
person who's not just reacting, but, actively shaping their life, guided by reason and that deep understanding of, well, themselves. But Spinoza also said that complete freedom from our emotions, probably not going to happen. We are human after all. So what does it even look like to strive for that kind of freedom in a world that's constantly, pulling us in different directions?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think Spinoza would probably say it's less about like detaching from our emotions completely and more about, getting them, understanding their power, their influence, and learning to use them in a way that fits, well, with who we want to be and what we want to do.
Okay, so not becoming some emotionless robot. Got it. More like what? Developing that emotional intelligence, being able to see our feelings, get where they're coming from, and then choose how we react.
Exactly. And that takes self-awareness, being willing to really look at how we think, how we act, catching ourselves when we're just reacting, on autopilot, and then taking that breath, that pause, and asking, hold on, is this really how I want to handle this? Is this the best me?
It's like stepping off that autopilot mode and actually making a choice. So we're not just reacting out of habit.
Right, exactly. And look, it's a journey. Nobody's perfect at this. There are going to be times when you slip back into old ways, emotions take over. But the important thing is, don't beat yourself up. Learn from it. Keep working towards that understanding and, well, acting in a better way each time.
Progress over perfection. Baby steps.
That's it. Trying to live each day a little bit more in line with, what we truly value, building that wisdom as we go.
And maybe even creating a ripple effect. Our choices influencing those around us.
Yeah, I love that idea. Paying it forward.
So with Spinoza, it's not just about personal growth. He saw this connection between us becoming better and society becoming better too.
Right. Absolutely. He wasn't just sitting in an ivory tower. To him, pursuing this understanding, it wasn't selfish. It was deeply ethical. It impacts how we treat each other, even how we build our world.
So imagine if everyone's trying to understand themselves, making reasoned choices, acting in ways that are good for them, A&D others, wouldn't that naturally lead to a society that's more just, more harmonious?
It's a beautiful vision, isn't it?
Yeah.
It speaks to the power of what Spinoza's saying, that it can inspire us to rethink what's possible, both for ourselves and for everyone.
Okay, so let's make this real. What are some things we can actually do to get a little bit of this Spinozan mindset, this mix of reason, understanding, action? What would it look like to live a little bit more on purpose, a little more like we're actually trying to get this?
Well, a good place to start is self-reflection. Take a few minutes each day just to check in with yourself. What are you thinking? What are you feeling? Notice those moments when you get reactive. What are your triggers? Those things that send you down that spiral of anger, anxiety, whatever your thing is.
It's like taking a time out before we react.
Exactly. And the more you see those patterns, the more you can experiment. Okay, this time, I'm going to take 3 deep breaths before I say anything. Or instead of getting pulled into that online fight, maybe I'll try having an actual conversation.
Creating that space between what happens and how we react.
That's it. And remember, it's a process. You're going to mess up. We all do. It's about being kind to yourself, learning from those slip-ups, and just keeping at it. Understanding gets better. Actions get better.
So it's that growth mindset, not aiming for perfection, taking those small steps day by day to live a life that feels true to us, to build that wisdom, and hey, maybe make the world a bit better in the process.
That's the hope, right?
It is. I gotta say, I'm feeling pretty inspired by all this. Spinoza's philosophy, it's not like a quick fix, a magic solution, but it gives us something way deeper, a way to understand ourselves in the world, to make choices with more awareness, to live a life that, well, feels like it has meaning.
Yeah, it really makes you think.
It does. And as we wrap this up, here's something to think about. Spinoza believed that real joy, real freedom, comes when we're in sync with, the whole universe, when we get our place in all of it, and when we're doing things that are good for everyone, not just ourselves. So as you go about your day, think, what choices am I making that show? I get that. How can I bring a little more reason, a little more kindness, a little more of that Spinozan wisdom to the people I meet and, well, to the world itself? Who knows? Maybe you'll find that trying to understand isn't just some philosophy thing. It's actually a way to live a life that's more fulfilling, has more meaning, and yes, even more joy.
That's a great way to end it.
Thanks for diving up with us. We'll see you next time.